coming back up? We'll see. Yes, it is. It is back up. All right, so let's talk about Japan for a bit. What is going on with Japan that leads them to attack us at Pearl Harbor? What is happening? Well, since really the turn of the century, a lot of things have happened, culminating in the Great Depression, when things are going to really get bad. Remember, you had the Russo-Japanese War ended in 1905. Who eventually gets blamed for that? For it not coming out the way that it should. Give you a hint. He gets a Nobel Peace Prize. Theodore Roosevelt gets blamed for that. What else? You have, during World War I, you have Japan winning the most, but losing the least. They lose like 125 men during their entire involvement in World War I. Then, when we get to the Great Depression, they are going to experience phenomenal population growth. They're going to add about 1 million new citizens to Japan every year during the Great Depression. So basically 29 through 40, they're going to just substantially increase their population. Now, what's the problem there? What?
Limited resources.
Very limited resources, and they have to go elsewhere to get those resources. Now, there's two ways you can get natural resources that you do not have, that are not given to you by nature, by God, what have you, in your predicament, in your society. And those are what? How do you get them? Buy them or take them, right? Buy them or take them. So what is Japan going to do? Japan is going to take them because it's always easier to take, well, supposedly, than to actually buy. Especially when they put so little concern into a person's life. Now, starting about the 1920s, you see the old guard retire, and you see a rise of a new class of citizen in Japan, and these are known as the ultranationalists. The ultranationalists are people, if they're nationalists, they really believe in their society. They really believe in their government. They really believe in the history of their nation. They're nationalists, right? Okay. Now, if you put ultra in front of that, what does that mean? Okay. Super. It's even greater. They're really, really, really big on their nationalism, and they will do anything to get their nation to be where they want it to be. Now, what type of things are they willing to do? Well, in 32, they assassinate members of the ruling council. In 33, they assassinate the Prime Minister of Japan. Opens up slots for other people to go into those positions, and they put their people into it. By 33, the ultranationalists have taken over society in Japan. Now, one of the things that they were really big into was the belief that the emperor was how does it work? The emperor was a descendant of the sun god Amaterasu. So he was a living god to be worshipped. Now, the emperor is Emperor Hirohito. If you were to ask a Japanese citizen who the emperor was prior to the ultranationalists coming into power, they'd probably say, we don't have an emperor, because it was so little known outside of the main ruling class that there was an emperor. But Emperor Hirohito had the desire to reign, not rule. If you desire to reign instead of ruling, what have you chosen to do? Chill. You're going to hang out, be worshipped, have people wait on you, but not actually have a stake in controlling the government. Now, the ultranationalists are going to play this for all it's worth. They're going to spin the entire culture and change the entire culture of Japan to be about hero worship of Hirohito. Your entire life exists to worship and obey the emperor. They're going to take over the school systems, and they're going to ingrain this in all of the school-age children, and by the time we get to 1940, you're going to have an entire society that is brainwashed into believing that the highest thing that they can give for their emperor is to give their life. As we'll see in a little bit, they're also going to teach that surrender is not honorable. They never signed the Geneva Convention that came up with these ideas of surrender and treatment of prisoners of war, and as a result, they saw no honor in surrendering. Yes, sir?
My uncle is in the Bataan Death March.
Yes.
And they saw one of the Japanese pilots.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they call it.
What was he in, a plane?
He jumped out of his plane.
Yes, ejected.
Yeah, but he said, no, that's one of your Japanese guys.
Mm-hmm.
They pulled out a gun and they shot him.
Yeah.
He was coming down.
Yep. Yep. Whenever, and that's going to hurt them in the long run. Because I think we talked about that last time. What's more important to have, a trained pilot or a new plane? A trained pilot with experience, because you can't buy experience. You know, we saw that with Operation Barbarossa on Friday when Hitler invaded Russia, and Russia took horrendous losses. So the schools basically become military academies, training the next generation of ultranationalist soldiers. Enforcing the will of the ultranationalists in society was kind of like a thought police, a Japanese Gestapo called the Kemptai. If you do not agree with the prevailing wisdom of society, the Kemptai took care of you to make sure that everybody was in agreement. The ultranationalists would draw on the issues such as the Theodore Roosevelt's involvement in the Russo-Japanese War, the Gentleman's Agreement of 1907, which basically limited Japanese people coming over to the United States. You had the immigration policies of 1921 and 1924, and they would take all these things and they would wrap it up and form it into an anti-Western hysteria, an anti-Western sentiment. Anything that was Western, meaning us, was done away with. One of the things that they were very big on was baseball. Still today. Baseball today is really big in Japan. At that time period, it was forbidden. Anything to do with Western ideas, attitudes, dress, nomenclature, anything like that is going to be considered bad and is going to be avoided to the best extent possible. Now, we've touched some of these before, but we'll just touch on them again. Remember, the Japanese need natural resources. Best place to get them is from your weakest neighbor. Their weakest neighbor is China. They invaded China and went into Manchuria in 1932. 1937, in Mukden, they staged an assault to go into and attack China. Yeah. I hate newly printed paper. It sticks together too much. They would firebomb the city of Peking. They would invade the Chinese city of Nanking. At Nanking, 200,000 citizens would be killed. There's an excellent book by Iris Chang titled The Rape of Nanking. I highly recommend it, unless you are very squeamish. Then I don't. Quite a bit of women were raped during this time period. And not just raped by one, gang raped. Their breasts were cut off. Their private parts impaled with all sorts of items. And there are pictures of these atrocities occurring. In one incident, 2 rival lieutenants of the Japanese army would decide the best way to figure out which one of them were the better swordsmen was to have a contest to see how many Chinese each one could behead. This would be picked up by the Japanese newspaper, and it would be publicized, and it would be promoted akin to our Super Bowl ads. Japanese citizens ran to the newspaper to get the latest edition to see which one was in the lead. Eventually, they'd call a draw at 127 each that they beheaded. The Japanese actions in Nanking would give the Nazis pause. The Nazis would stop and say, wow, that's brutal. Okay? The Nazis would. They would never apologize. They would never pay reparations. Still today, many times they don't even talk about it. When Iris Chang's book came out, the Japanese government ruled it a piece of propagandist filth because it was something that was not true, although there are lots of pictures and there are survivors.
Why did they do that?
Are you Japanese? Then you are the lowest life form on the earth, and you are therefore dispensable for any reason. You'll see this as we get a little bit further. Japanese culture had it that the emperor was the highest, then you would have generals, then you would have colonels, then you would have majors, then you would have captains, then you would have lieutenants, then you would have sergeants, and then down to the enlisted men. And the way that they disciplined their soldiers was with violence and abuse. If you did something wrong and you were a lieutenant, your captain would slap you. He'd slap you in front of everyone. Just belittle you, humiliate you in front of everyone. And what if you were a private and everybody's been beating you up? Who are you going to turn your frustration on? Somebody who's not Japanese. Yeah, you'll see that when we talk about the Battalion Death March. After seeing how quickly Poland rolled over and everything else with Hitler's Blitzkrieg, Japan asked Vichy France if they could invade some of France's areas over in Indochina. They get permission and they invade places like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. They would be there till the war ends. In 1940, they would sign the Tripartite Pact with Italy and Germany, creating the Axis powers. Now, Japan clashed with Russia over a 2-week front in 1939 and were chewed up so badly that it led them to seek that non-aggression pact we've talked beforehand about with Russia. That Russia, remember, they don't invade Poland until the 17th of September 1939. They were waiting until that was done. Now, China has its own problems. It is a republic that is pretty much supported and set up and held in place by the United States. Remember the open door policies, all those things that we've been talking about? By this time, they have a president in the form of General Chiang Kai-shek. He is in charge of the Republic of China. However, there is an insurrection movement that has been going on for a while in China, led by Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong is a communist. If you've ever seen a picture of Tiananmen Square in China. There's a huge picture of a guy hanging on one of the battlements. That is Mao Zedong. Now, they've been fighting for years, neither one of them able to knock the other out. The United States is supplying Chiang Kai-shek with supplies. Remember, we talked about that. FDR supplies both of them because technically they are not at war, and therefore he can get around the Neutrality Acts at that time period because he was not supplying troops to countries at war. They were fighting internally, so he was able to get around that. Now, one thing you always hear from idiots, and there's a lot of them out there. Have you guys noticed there's a lot of idiots out there in the world? Quite a few. Is that Hitler is the worst person in the world for all the people he killed, right? Oh my gosh, Hitler killed 6 million Jews. I am not discounting the 6 million Jews that were killed. However, these same people will usually try to tell you that communism is good and that communism never hurt anyone. Have you ever had a conversation or seen somebody say something like that? Absolutely absurd. Hitler killed about 6 million. World War II killed around 20 million. Stalin, in his purge, about 20, 25, 40 million. Mao Zedong, estimates 65 million to 80 million of his own people he killed. Why? They disagreed with him. When I was in grad school, I had a professor who was from Poland, while Poland was still part of Russia. At the age of 8, his family was sent to Siberia because he was ruled a danger to Russian security. How old was he? He was 8. Eventually they would escape from Siberia down to India, and then from India would come to the United States. Okay? How do you kill 65 million people because they oppose your rule? How do you know? The answer is you don't. Kind of like the Marine philosophy, what? Ross isn't here. He's joining the Marines, but he should know this. Kill them all, let God sort them out. Okay? Of course, we've never killed 65 million people. Now, FDR, once World War II breaks out, is going to try to get Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong to work together, put aside their differences, and attack the Japanese, because the Japanese are invading. However, here's the deal. Japan's dynasty, their government, their society goes back 4,000 years. What's a little invasion of Japanese forces when your nation has stood for 4,000 years? So basically what's going to happen is going to be a three-pronged battle. You have the Japanese versus the Chinese versus the communists all fighting. At the end of the war, eventually the Republic of China, the forces under General Chiang Kai-shek, are going to flee the mainland of China and go to Taiwan, where they are today. If you ever heard of the Republic of China, they're talking about Taiwan. Whenever you hear the People's Republic of China, anytime you hear people, it's communist. People's Republic of China is communist. China says that Taiwan is in rebellion. Taiwan says that the mainland is in rebellion. Neither of them can defeat the other. And the United States has a two-China policy, although we won't admit it. We don't admit to the other one that we recognize the other nation. Okay? Because that's wrong. The Republic of China is our allies. The People's Republic of China is communist, but we don't take either one off. So that's what they're having to deal with at the same time. Yes, ma'am?
Who was that?
That's Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong, yes. Also had a penchant for little boys. Yeah, the younger the better. He was one of the biggest perverts, pedophiles in the history of the world. After he was done with them, the boys were usually killed to put them out of their misery. So back to Japan. a disconnect in the military. You have the Army, which wants to continue on their invasion in China. They're making great headway. And then you have the Navy, who wants a piece of the action. The Navy needs oil to continue. That's what their ships run on. They do not have oil. They want to get oil. This area, Philippine Islands, especially right here, the bottom of the Philippines, Indonesia, this whole area is extremely rich in oil. Extremely rich. If they take it, they will have their war machine will be supplied with oil for generations. Now, as soon as news of as soon as you have news regarding the invasion of Nanking and the things that are coming out, bombing of Peking, FDR is going to place limits on what Japan is able to import. We're going to cut off their steel, and then later we're going to cut off our oil, their oil. How many of you have seen that god-awful movie, not Titanic, just as bad, Pearl Harbor? Okay? All right. Best part of that movie is the 1 hour, hour 2 of the 3-hour train wreck in which Ben Affleck is dead. Okay? Why? Because Ben Affleck is dead? Wonderful. Once he comes back, terrible. At the very beginning, you see the Japanese people flying to the carrier and they're saying, we must attack the Americans. They are evil. They are cutting off our oil and our steel. And all we're doing is trying to live peacefully. We must take it for ourselves. Okay? Well, what were they doing at this time? What were they doing? They're killing tens of thousands in Nanking. They're killing untold number of people in China. And we were trying to stop them short of war the best way we could. But, no, Pearl Harbor, let's make it honorable. Let us go. No. Full blankety blank. Okay? They're the aggressors. They're the ones we're trying to stop. So, why does the Army want invasion? Why don't they want to go and out in the ocean and get oil? Come on, this is easy. Carlos, what? Where does the Army operate? What? Where the Army operates on what? They operate on land. Why would they? Army is Army, Navy is Navy. They don't like each other. Okay, same thing here. You got an uncle who's in the Army, you got an uncle who's in the Navy. They don't like each other. They snipe at each other. No, we're better. No. That's how it is, right? Okay? If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, go join the military. It's great. I highly recommend it. So, what happens now is the Navy is going to go out on their own and plan the assault on Pearl Harbor and to take away the American presence in the Pacific. Now, Japan is the largest Navy in the Pacific. Okay? Second largest Navy is United States. But who has the largest Navy between the two? Okay? How did I say it? In the Pacific, second in the Pacific is United States. We've got a fleet where? Here, and a fleet here. Remember, we built that whole Panama Canal thing, and then we decided, nah, we're good. Let's just have a fleet over here. And a fleet over here. All right? So, here's the deal. Japan realizes if they take our Navy out, it'll take too long to get the Navy from the Atlantic, and they've got problems over there to begin with, around either the Cape of Good Horn or through the Panama Canal, and get them out there in enough time to keep the Japanese from fortifying anything that they steal. Anything that they steal, they're going to be able to fortify quickly. If you guys saw an excellent movie series on HBO called The Pacific, last year or just recently. It's out on Netflix. You can go to the Blockbuster. Awesome. Okay? Seriously awesome. Not as good as Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers is by far the best. I think mainly because Band of Brothers is one book. Pacific is two books that they're trying to mesh together. It doesn't always work well. So what their goal is, Japan's goal is to take out the United States Navy, and by taking out our Navy, they're going to be able to have unfettered access to the Dutch East Indies. Going to get down there, going to get all that oil, and they're going to be unstoppable. So how are they going to do it? Well, here's the deal. Still today, people say, oh, FDR knew the attack was coming at Pearl Harbor. That's why he moved the forces out to Oahu. FDR did know that the attack was coming. He did know. But he didn't know where. Did not know where. Now, one of the things about this war is you're going to see a shift in the importance of certain types of naval vessels. What was the big run-up to World War I? What was the shift that everyone wanted to have the biggest and best of? What was it? The dreadnought. I'm the dreadnought. The monstrosity. Bigger guns, but fewer. Okay? This war is going to be between battleships and aircraft carriers. Very few battleship battles are going to occur. Battleships on battleships battles. Mainly they are battleship carriers, battleship carriers or battleships, sometimes destroyers when you get to the Battle of the Java Sea. But what happens here is when FDR starts getting reports that Japan is increasing their militaristic advances in the Pacific, he is going to order the Navy to be moved, the Pacific Fleet to be moved from San Diego to Hawaii, to Oahu in Hawaii. There's a place called Pearl Harbor. Excellent anchorage. It's an interior harbor, not too deep, which is bad for torpedo attacks because when you drop a torpedo, standard flying of torpedoes, they hit deep and then they come up and then they attack. So those aren't going to be able to be used because they're deep enough to get the battleships in, but they're not deep enough for torpedo assaults. Kind of like nobody can get through the Ardennes, unfortunately. So we move the fleet out to Oahu. And the reason we move the fleet out to Oahu is like playing chess. All right, okay, what's your next move? See, we knew they were planning something because we had broken their diplomatic code. We were reading their mail. Their diplomatic code we had called purple, and we were reading what they were telling their diplomats, negotiating in good faith with our diplomats in Washington, D.C. We knew exactly what they were saying, but we didn't know where the attack was going to come. This was planned out well in advance. Japan had spies in Hawaii for years. As a result, they knew exactly where to hit us, when to hit us, and how to hit us. They knew the best time to attack us was when we least expected it. The time that we were least going to expect it is going to be when? Not that early, not that time in the morning. It's dawn. What day? I know, December 7th, 1941. That's not what I'm looking for. What day of the week was it? It was the Sunday. Why? What do you guys do on Saturday? Let me put it this way. What do you guys do on Thursday? Okay. What you do on Thursday, they did on Saturday night, because the next day there were half shifts. Some people were off. Some people were going to church. Some people were just going to stay in the rack. So they knew to attack us when we were at our weakest, when we were tired, when we were exhausted, and we were going to be very poorly manned. Now, these Japanese diplomats that were negotiating with us knew that an attack was coming. They would get the message that they were supposed to deliver a declaration of war, and it was supposed to be delivered our time, December 7th, around a little bit before 6 a.m., because if you do that and say, here's a declaration of war, war is declared, you go and you attack. If that declaration of war is not given, and then you attack anyway, it has different connotations. It's not seen as honorable. Now, granted, what they're going to do is not honorable anyway, but especially for the Japanese, they're going to be very upset about this. They don't deliver the declaration of war until after Pearl Harbor is bombed due to a coding problem of their own. Now, we had this brand new invention called radar that allowed you to see things in the air coming towards you, or surface vessels, depending on where you placed it. Now, because of a battle between the Parks Administration in Hawaii and the Army, they could not get the highest point available to put this radar device. As a result, the closest place they could get it was on the North Shore behind a cliff. Needless to say, the limitations were quite ripe for problems. Because radar was so new, there was very few people who understood how to read it. And when they did, there was always a chance of false images being returned. Kind of like the boy who cried wolf. Oop, oop, oop. Eventually what happens? You negate it. You stop listening. Now, the general in command of the the Air Force at the time, the Army is part of the Air Force. The Air Force is part of the Army. Excuse me. We do not have a separate Air Force until '45. Is General Walter Short. Walter Short is going to order that all the planes on the tarmacs around Pearl Harbor be grouped close together and parked close together, and lit up 24 hours a day. That way, saboteurs could not get to it very easily and blow it up. However, unfortunately, that does keep the saboteurs away, but it also causes problems because if a bomb is dropped on one, the explosion will spread and sympathetic explosions will go off right next to it. Now, how many guys have ever been to Pearl Harbor? Anybody been to Pearl Harbor? Okay. Go to Pearl Harbor. It's always kind of funny when I went to Pearl Harbor because I was expecting you always see Pearl Harbor, it's on the coast. Right? You think it's on the coast. No, it's not. This is the coast right here. And you go in a good ways. And right here is the Arizona. Actually, I think Arizona's right there, and that's the Missouri. And what's going to happen here is because it was seen as conventional wisdom held that it was not an area that was conducive to torpedo attacks, it was viewed as okay to double moor ships. And what that means is you have these mooring pylons that were had been sunk in the middle of the harbor that they would tie onto. Well, because there were so many ships there, shifted from San Diego, they moored them right next to each other. So basically what you had is you had like a mooring pylon here, a mooring pylon here, and you would have a very bad ship. Now, tie it on right there, then you'd have another one there. Well, here's the problem. Torpedo coming gets one, and what happens? Same thing that happened to the planes happens to the battleships. Now, prior to dawn, December 7th, 1941, the Japanese flotilla that was going to attack Pearl Harbor left under radio silence Japan, November 26th. They would proceed under radio silence until they got to the point where they were supposed to receive a radio signal. They turned on their radios and heard the go phrase, the go phrase, climb Mount Nikita, which meant operation is a go for next morning. The end of day, December 6, 1941, they were 200 miles away from Hawaii. The next morning, they would launch 2 assaults of a Plan 3. The first assault would catch our boys sleeping. Now see, the problem with Pearl Harbor is that it is too shallow for a traditional torpedo run. But the problem is if a plane comes in, let's put the canopy up there, comes in at a very low angle, and here's the water, they can drop their torpedo, set it to run shallow, and then hit, which is what they did. Now, one of the things I like about studying history is that history changes. For 40 years, we had always known that Japan got the first lick in on us in this war. There had been a report of earlier in the day a destroyer spotting and a periscope trailing behind a tugboat coming into Pearl Harbor. The destroyer dropped depth charges in the vicinity of that, but no oil or anything else to show an actual explosion, an underwater explosion, was ever seen. Jump forward around 50 years, and in that exact area, a Japanese midget, the wreckage of a Japanese midget submarine, which carried 2 men, was found. So apparently we got the first licks in. Although we definitely didn't win Pearl Harbor. We did attack them before they attacked us. So, in the first assault, the first assault, the Arizona is destroyed. A bomb is dropped from a Japanese bomber straight through an open hatch, right into her weapons magazine. She explodes immediately. This is the picture of her. She would be sunk, destroyed beyond repair, taking with her 1,100 soldiers. The Oklahoma would be torpedoed so badly, these are all battleships, would be torpedoed so badly she would sink, turn over, and her superstructure would go into the mud, trapping 600 sailors, leaving them to die of suffocation. There was not welding equipment that was strong enough to get through the hull from underneath. The California is going to be damaged. She's going to be abandoned as a lost cause due to all the flames that were seen on her and around her. However, after the flames were put out, it was discovered that that was mainly the oil and the gasoline that was on the water. She would come and she would be fixed and she would return later. The Nevada would be damaged as well. I can't ever remember the Nevada or the Nevada. The Nevada gets hit by 6 bombs, 1 torpedo. She gets underway. Her captain tries to get her out of Pearl Harbor and into an area where she can fight. Unfortunately, another torpedo hits her right before she gets out of the mouth of Pearl Harbor, and she starts sinking. The captain, knowing what would happen if she was sunk in the mouth of Pearl Harbor, does something that is going to actually save her. What is the problem with being sunk in the mouth of the harbor? You block it. Nobody's going to be able to get out. None of the other ships are going to be able to get out. He runs her aground. The West Virginia is going to be damaged as well. Her rudder is going to be shorn off. She is going to be repaired in time for the Battle of Leyte Gulf in 45. The USS Utah is going to be sunk. She is a World War I battleship. Not that big of a, I hate to say this, but not that big of a loss. She was a relic. She was not the equivalent of these other ships, and as a result, she had been decommissioned and was basically being used as a target hull. They're going to take her out and use her for target practice, something we did with a lot of our ships. The Maryland is going to be damaged as well, and she is going to be the one that receives the least amount of damage, and with the least amount of damage, the lower percentage of turnaround time. She's going to come back to fight at Midway in 1942. All in all, 3,000 military are killed in this assault. We don't know how many civilians because there wasn't a record kept. And as a result, when they were killed and they died, the Hawaiian people just buried them. I'd like to say that the vast number of the Japanese, the vast number of people that were killed of Hawaiians were Japanese. Unfortunately, most of them were killed by Americans. If you shoot anti-aircraft shells into the air that blow up right above you, they come down. There were 3 planned attacks. The first one, successful. Second one, took off. First one returns. When the first one returns, the third sortie was being prepped. When they find out that the object of the attack was not there, the carriers, the third assault was called off. The third assault was scheduled to target Pearl Harbor's vast supplies of oil. Had they destroyed those, we probably would not have had the opportunity to ever regain the areas that the Japanese would take. However, the carriers were not there. They were on maneuvers further north. Japanese did not know that. And since that was their target, the third assault was called back. When he hears that the carriers were not there, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto would state, "I fear we have awakened a sleeping giant," and filled him with a terrible resolve. Now, Pearl Harbor is just the start of the Japanese attack. Later on that day, they would attack the Philippines as well. Oh, what's going on there? Never can tell. They would attack Malaya, which was a British colony. They would attack Java, modern-day Batavia, modern-day Jakarta. Americans would be pushed back from Guam, Wake, and the Philippines, and the Aleutian Island chain. The Aleutian Island chain is what comes off of Alaska right here. Yes, they get that far. The Philippines are going to take a while to fall. We'll talk about that on Wednesday. That brings us to the bad news. The United States is not prepared for war. No matter what we had done, we were not ready. And to compensate, to try to get back to that point where we needed to be from what we lost with the losses at Pearl Harbor was going to take us a very long time. FDR is going to call for permission to go before Congress the next day, December 8th, 1941. They're calling December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy. He asks Congress to recognize that there is a state of war between Japan and the United States. Congress gives him the declaration of war. I always love this one. What? Well, I'll get there in a second. It's bizarre. I've never understood that one. For you trivia buffs, this will be the last declaration of war the United States has ever had. We have not had a declaration of war since World War II. Have we been involved in wars since then? But no president has ever asked for one, and no Congress has ever given one. Now, bizarrely enough, the Tripartite Pact did not call for retribution of a nation, a member nation being attacked to join in. But bizarrely enough, the next day after FDR gets the declaration of war, Hitler's going to declare war on the United States. That's going to be instrumental when we get a little bit further, but for right now, you just need to put it in, just say, okay, why? And nobody's ever really given me a good answer for that. Now, Japan is going to take from all this new area that they have taken, they're going to create an area that they call the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. They like big words, big titles. So things are not going good for the United States. We've been sucker punched, much like the Toby Keith song. You know. But we'll get our licks in as well. That's where we'll stop for today. See you guys on Wednesday.
Go back to the last one.
Yes.